Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday morning, afternoon, or evening, or if you're on the other side of the world, could even be Saturday. If you are tuning in live here on Behance today, definitely throw your name in the chat and let me know where you're from and tuning in from as well. We've got Vipin and Julia and Marilyn and Vanille and Cody and Reshma and Andre and Ahmed and PM and Jack is in the house. A lot of awesome people, some regulars, some new folks. Thank you for tuning in today, spending your Friday with me. So, what are we going to tackle today? Today's gonna be a fun one. Hey Michael, hey Wade, hey Amar, Colby. Great to see everyone. Hope you're all staying safe. Hope you're all washing your hands, social distancing when possible. We've got Michael from Los Angeles, Cody from Florida, Tia from Los Angeles, Mary from Boston, Malik from India, Nahid from Bangladesh, Shannon from Shannon, apparently, Leandro from Peru. Great to see everyone. All right, so here we go. We're going to hop over to my screen and we are going to get started. This is going to be fun. You may have seen a teaser on Instagram or on Twitter, and I had an idea because I've been addicted to Animal Crossing lately. Maybe we'll design like a companion application. So I put some suggestions out to our internal Slack channel, all about Animal Crossing. It's fantastic. We have that at work, and I got some great suggestions. So we are going to get going, hop into Adobe XD. I'm going to start off with, I don't know, let's say an iPhone 10, 10s, 11 Pro artboard, and we are going to get going. Now I will note that I don't think my music is coming through today. I did get a new computer, and for whatever reason, it's just not cooperating in terms of the music. So I'll figure that out. If you can't hear the music, I do apologize. I'll try to talk as much as I can throughout this process. All right, we are going to start this process off with a nice pro tip. And this is the amazing thing about these masterclasses. It's all full of pro tips. You know, maybe you've been using Adobe XD for a while and you want to try out something new. And here's how we're going to do it. So let me hop out of Finder just for a second. And I've got some assets that I grabbed from the Animal Crossing website. And of course, I'm not using this for commercial use. I'm just using it for educational purposes. So obviously no copyright intended. But, you know, I've got this great confetti pattern over here that I might want to sing for us instead. Okay, no, you don't want to do that. Then I'll lose a lot of people. A lot of people will just drop off the stream. So I've got this really nice confetti type pattern that was used on the Animal Crossing website. And of course, you know, I can just drag it into an artboard, drag it into a rectangle and things like that. But maybe we can create our own. So what we're going to do throughout this entire hour is we are going to draw out each and every individual polygon on... No? Shouldn't do that? Okay. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to start by selecting this artboard, and I'm going to sample a color. And I may want to sample, let's say, this green that's kind of overtaking this entire pattern. So I'm going to press the I key on my keyboard and boop, sample the color. Now I may also want to kind of pull some of these colors to use in maybe a design system that I can be using throughout this project. So very quickly, I'm just going to grab a rectangle over here to the side and just start sampling some of these colors, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to very quickly go through. I believe there's 3 different greens aside from the background. And I can go ahead and turn off the border within my properties inspector. And then if I go ahead down at the bottom here and I open up my assets panel, boop, there we go. That's my layers panel. I want the assets panel, of course. I have all 3 of those rectangles selected. I can hit the colors, the plus button beside colors, and all of them will be automatically added in, which is exactly what we want. So we can very quickly use some of these colors as we're designing this application. Now, of course, you know, we want to figure out how to create this pattern without manually creating each and every polygon. Nobody wants to deal with that, right? And I have an idea. So here's what we're going to do. On this artboard here, we're going to start by just creating one polygon. So I'm going to grab my polygon tool, shortcut key Y, and draw one out. Like that. Fancy. Color doesn't really matter, but I will go ahead and select one of these greens And that looks pretty good, right? Of course, we could duplicate this over, choose another color, make it a little bit smaller, do that. Maybe we can even select both of these and kind of move things around, but nah, there's another way. So we've got one polygon created. We're going to hop into the assets panel, which, Vanille has spoiled it, the confetti plugin. Oh yeah. So we're going to hop into the plugins panel right at the bottom. Oh, I have it open already. You didn't see that. So we're going to be using the confetti plugin, as Vanille just mentioned, this one right here. If you haven't explored plugins yet, definitely hit the plus button at the top and the plugin manager will open up. You'll be able to browse a ton of different plugins, from things like UI Faces to Anima, which is a new one, Whiteboard, which is recently created by one of the teams at Adobe. Fantastic plugin. I'm working on a video for that. But you can also hop in and search for confetti. And you will see too, there is a legacy version. Don't worry about that. Go ahead and install the regular confetti plugin. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up just like this. And there's a lot of different options in here. You can choose how many columns and rows you want. You can randomize the opacity and the rotation, and this will really help us dial in to get a pattern that's very similar to this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just start experimenting, because a lot of it's all about experimentation. So maybe columns, which goes across, maybe I'll do 10. We'll start there. We'll see what that looks like. Maybe for rows, because it's a longer artboard going down, we'll try 15. Again, all about experimentation. Not going to worry too much about the opacity because we will be using a few different colors, but I do want to randomize the rotation, and I'll keep it at 90 to 360 for now. We'll see how that looks. I do want to randomize the scale so that some of the pieces of the confetti are a little bit smaller, some of them are a little bit larger. Maybe I'll just bump this up to about 150. Probably don't have to worry about depth of field, but if you do want it to appear as, some are a little bit further away, some are a bit closer, you can kind of mess with that as well. But of course, we do want to randomize the colors, and this is where our colors come into play. You can either go into your assets panel, right click and copy, and then go back into your layers panel right here. So we've got one selected already, which is probably the one that we just copied, right? So if I go back into my assets, I can copy this. And of course, you can select the individual objects, copy it within your properties inspector as well. So I will go ahead and color number 2, just that one there. And then finally, we're going to copy color number 3 back to our plugins. Ooh, I jumped the gun. And I'm going to paste. So now that we have 3 colors, we have all the different colors on this original design right here. And you know what? Let's see how things are looking. So with one of the polygons, our only polygon selected, all I'm going to do is press run. Ooh, look at that. It's okay. It's not great, but it's not bad. I'm going to actually drop the size of this original polygon to see if that helps a little bit. I'll pop it up here, press run. You know what? That's not too bad. It's definitely getting there. And of course, if we don't want some of them too large, we can maybe drop the maximum scale to maybe 120, possibly. Ooh, you know what? I'm kind of digging it. I think it's going to work. And of course, you can always dive in because these are individual objects. If any are overlapping, you can just select them individually, move them around if you want to, just like this. And you know what? I am liking this. And all these objects are individual and they're all vector, so we can dive in. They remain as polygons, so you can always adjust the properties over to the right. But you know what? I think this is going to work. So back in my layers panel, what I want to do is select all these crazy polygons. There's 151 polygons, right? I'm going to select them all. I can group them just so that things are nicely organized. I'm going to double click and I'm going to name this background confetti. Oh yeah, there we go. Sharzil is saying, just joined now. I don't know why. Whenever I see you live, I feel so happy. Thank you, Sharzil. I appreciate you joining me. So we've tackled our background, and that looks pretty fancy. Now, of course, the entire thing isn't going to be seen. We can go ahead and delete this. So we want some elements kind of floating over top of this background. There's a few things we might want. Daniel's saying, can you global edit this later if you want to change color? You can. So do you remember earlier that we saved some of these colors to our assets panel? Because the confetti plugin used these colors to apply all those little polygons over to the right on our artboard, if I decided to change these colors, I simply right click on any of the colors in the assets panel, press edit, and change it. And it changes all of them, which is fantastic. What more can you ask for? But I like these colors, so I'm going to undo this. All right, so now on this artboard, there's a few things we might want. We might want some sort of a container to house the majority of our content because we don't want all these confettis to be distracting us. So I'm going to grab my rectangle and I'm going to draw out one from the bottom to right about here. Now, you might be asking, why is it kind of floating in the middle of this artboard? And there's a few reasons. One, well, the main reason is down here, we're going to use this as a navigation bar. So we're going to have all of our cute little icons, which we're going to be designing right here at the bottom. And then, maybe at the top, we'll have something else. Who knows? And then, of course, in the middle, we're going to have all the content. And this particular artboard is going to be a task list. And this is one of the suggestions that one of my coworkers gave me in our Slack channel. Someone's asking, what's the shortcut to group layers? It is Command or Control G. So Command G on the Mac, Control G on Windows. Someone's asking about an issue with XD. Go to Twitter, go to Adobe Support or Adobe Care, and they'll be able to help you. Unfortunately, I probably can't tackle some of those things during these streams. Now, for this, the white background looks okay, but what I might want to do is just bring in a little bit of color. So maybe I'll just hop over here, right over here, and just kind of bring in just a tiny bit of green, just like that, just so it's not pure white. It just blends in a little bit, but not too much. You don't want to go, right? You don't want to go something like this, because then it just doesn't look great, and it blends in a little bit too much with the background. So just bring in a little bit of that green. I think it looks pretty nice. The next thing I might want to do is, because this is a fun app, it's all about, gaming and animals and crossing, I don't know. We may want to round out the corners a touch. So on the inside of your rectangles, you've got these little handles all around the corners, right? And you can just pull them in. And you've got this nice little curve going on. Now, I don't know if I want it at the top. We could leave it like that. We're going to put something up here eventually, but for now, we'll just kind of move this up. Maybe we'll put a search bar up here if you want to search for villagers or search for items or fossils or whatever it might be. So we'll leave it like that for now. But what you could do is you can always grab these handles with your Alt or Option key held down and whoop, right? Just like that. You can just kind of pull them back and it will not affect the other ones. But I'm kind of liking that curved style, so we will leave it as that. Now, down below, just to add a little bit of depth to this design, we may want a touch of a shadow. And I say touch of a shadow because I talk about shadows a lot. Shadows are often overdone. You may have heard me say this quite often. If I go ahead and activate a shadow, right, I see a lot of times people do something like this. Don't do that, right? Don't do that. Shadows should be very subtle. So what I'm going to do is I have the Y value cranked up a little bit. I'm also going to crank up the blur value quite a bit, something like that. And then I might want to, introduce a little bit of green, but a darker green, something like that. And if we take a look at the preview, the play button at the top right, you're going to notice it's nice and subtle. And of course, you can always play with the values. So I can bring this back in a touch. And that looks pretty good. You can also keep your preview window over to the side as you're making changes. That way, you can always see it over there, or you can put it on a second monitor. You can also hook up your phone via USB, and Ashley's saying, don't do that. I agree, Ashley. Don't do that. Very subtle with your shadows. The good rule of thumb, and I heard Peter Del Tondo talk about this not too long ago, is you should try to design to not use shadows. And then if you need to use a shadow, make it nice and subtle. So something like this I think could work. We may revisit it a little bit later on. I may even drop the opacity just a little bit so it's even more subtle to around 10%. Don't want to spend too much time on the shadows, but I think that's looking pretty good. All right. Now that we have our container in place, we have our great background in place, and if you're just joining, we did create this background from scratch using the confetti plugin, and I will be uploading a separate tutorial on how to create this on YouTube at some point, probably next week, because I think this is just such a cool thing. So next thing we want to do is tackle the actual icons. So what I'm thinking here is maybe there's an icon for home, Maybe there's an icon to access your villagers, your friends list, your task list, which we're going to be designing, and maybe a profile. Let's go ahead and start. I'm going to start actually by dragging out some guides, maybe to about 32 pixels from the left, sticking with that 8 pixel grid, 32 pixels from the right, and let's start creating an icon. And of course you can grab icons from an icon manager, a plugin, but I want to, create this kind of to be true to Animal Crossing. Also, I want to have some fun with this. So for this, I'm going to grab my pen tool. Let's zoom in here so we can really see what's going on. I'm going to grab my pen tool and simply draw out a little roof. I don't want it perfectly straight because things in Animal Crossing are a little bit skewed. It's a fun game. And let's say the roof is right about here, and boop, just like that. Drag it down over here, right? And up, and over, and down. Now, that's not looking great right now, but what's nice is I can always grab some of these points and just move them around like this. Let me also turn on the fill, just to kind of see what's happening, and then I might want to add a little bit of a border. So I can sample this green, which you're not going to be able to see, and then maybe kind of pull it back a little bit so it's a little bit lighter. There we go. Now, still not loving this. So I'm going to dive in here, make some changes. I'm going to straighten out the roof just a touch, just like this, right? And all of a sudden, things are kind of, keeping an eye on the chat over here, things are starting to look a little bit better. Again, not perfect, but it's starting to look like a house, sort of. Zoom out, it's okay. Maybe I'll pull this back inwards a little bit. It could do. It could do, pig. There we go. It's all right. I'll definitely be tweaking this a little bit later on, but it's a fun game. The art style isn't super complex, but it's a little bit, wacky, right? Hey, Kate, welcome. Cody's asking, do you guys have a favorite Animal Crossing villager? Mine's Molly. Ooh. Currently on my island, Stitches is my favorite, but Raymond is my spirit animal, so I'm trying to get him. One day I will get Raymond. Now, for the actual text of this particular icon, in 99% of my designs, I use a sans serif font. But I think we're going to switch things up a little bit, because if you take a look at the Animal Crossing website, they use some serif fonts. So I'm going to grab my text tool. I'm going to type out home. Right? Obviously, this isn't working a lot. It's not working. And one thing we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit smaller. We are going to change the fill to white. And I grabbed from Adobe stock this font called Scholar Latin. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And it just has a little bit of a fun feel to it. I'm going to bump this up to about medium. Make sure it's centered. And let's take a look at what this looks like. So if you open the preview, it's looking okay. Again, I'm not loving this house. What I might want to do actually is just pull these up a little bit so the roof is a little bit steeper. Pull these in a touch and just really start messing with this. It's getting there. Again, I will probably make some changes to this at some point, but I don't want to spend an hour designing a house icon, right? So I'll just pop this right about there. So that's looking pretty good, right? I can, of course, make all of this a little bit larger, but let's go ahead and create the other icons. And then if we need to make things bigger or smaller, we can definitely do that. So I'm going to make sure to group these. I'm going to call this home. And now the next icon we might want to create is one to access our villagers. And we can do that. There's a lot of different villagers in Animal Crossing of all sorts of species, but a bear or a raccoon, I think, could work. If you're not familiar with Animal Crossing, go look it up. It's a fun game. So what I might want to do is grab why not add a little door? Ooh, David, that's a good idea. I may get to that at some point. I'm going to grab my ellipse and I'm going to draw one out just like this. This is going to be the bear or raccoon's little tiny face. I do have white selected for the fill, which is exactly what I want. Now, this is a very nicely curved shape, which again, we may not necessarily want. So I'm going to double click on this to access the path, and I can start making some changes. I can pull this up a little bit. I can kind of pull this down to give him a little bit of cheeks, right? And his face doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. You can just have some fun with it. Just like this. I know you guys can't hear my music, but it's working. It's helping me out throughout this process. All right, so we've got our raccoon or bear's little tiny face, and now we need some ears. So with my ellipse tool one more time, drag out some ears. I'm going to hold down my shift key to constrain it to a perfect circle. Look at those cute little ears. And move one across. And just like I did with the face, I can double click on these to, skew them just a little bit, just so they have a little bit of style. They don't have to be perfect, and they certainly don't have to be exactly the same as the one on the other side. And there we go. I would vote it a bear. Of course you would, Cody Bear. Now what we could do, completely up to you, you don't have to do this, but you can combine these shapes using your Boolean options at the top right. So I'm going to go ahead and combine these. Boop, there we go. And I'm going to name this bear face. Now maybe on top of this cute little bear's face, just to kind of really let us know that it's a bear face. Dave is asking, what are you playing? I've got the Chill Hop records going on, copyright-free music that we purchased. So if it does play, I won't get dinged for that. We may want a face. We may want some eyes. We may want a cute little nose. So with the ellipse tool one more time, I'll draw out an eye. Now maybe for the color, because white on white, just not going to work. We have used this blue over here, so I'll just grab my eyedropper tool, shortcut key I, and sample. And there we have a little eye. Cute little eye. Now maybe for the eyes, possibly, we'll keep them at perfect circles, just so our bear can see properly. But for the nose, which we're going to duplicate down here, already this looks super cute, doesn't it? But for the nose, I'm going to double click and I'm just going to make a few changes. Again, nothing crazy, but we now have a little bit of a nose. Cute. Maybe I'll pull this up just a touch more, and there we go. Yeah, that's working. All right, now we have our villager. We're also going to grab the home text over here, and I'll just type out villagers. Beautiful. And I'll make sure to put all of these elements inside a group, call it villagers, and this, grouping all this stuff will definitely help when we start aligning things a little bit later on. Now, the next one, we might want maybe a friends list or maybe our task list, but let's go for tasks. So again, this is going to be fun because of course you could just dive into a plugin. You can go to, let's say, the icons for design plugin, type out list, and you've got some, pretty nice looking list icons, but this is a very fun application. It's very different than your typical list application. You lost the entire masterclass. Well, you can always rewatch this later on if you are just joining in late, Claudio. So, and you can even you're watching on YouTube right now, just fast forward or rewind and you can start from the beginning. The chat won't make sense, but you can definitely do that. So with my line tool, I'm going to draw one out on a little bit of an angle. I'm going to really increase the size of this line, change it to white, and I do want to round out the caps. That way it kind of goes along with the feel of the rest of our design. So Cornell's asking no border for the bear. Now I thought about that, but I don't know if it'll look very nice. So if I apply this border here, right? I don't know, it looks a little bit strange. It's not bad. It's not great though. So I use that blue, that little highlight border blue that we used in the home icon for the eyes instead. I can go back and forth on that. Not sold just yet, but we will see. Maybe I'll make this one more bigger. So we have one line for one task, and then we may want to duplicate this down, and maybe we'll just, move it like that and like that, right? Something like that. So now that we have a little bit of a list going on, our smart guides and padding are helping us out, letting us know that things are nicely aligned. We may also want to create some check marks, for example. And for that, we can very easily just use a line, boop, boop, and boop. There we go, right? Make this a little bit larger. That's probably not going to work, but we will run with it. Do that. There we go. Jan Eric says, fun fact, the Animal Crossing exists in the same universe as Doom. Yes, I was definitely following along with the memes that were coming out of that. So we've got our check mark looking pretty good. We may also want to round out the corners a little bit because you're noticing the corner at the bottom edge is a little bit sharp. So if I just press this, it'll nicely round it out, which again fits our aesthetic of this design. Maybe I'll just drop the border. Maybe I can go 1.5. Even though, if you press up and down, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? You can always do decimals. So 1.5 looks pretty good. So maybe I'll put 1 here and then 1 over here, but I will not put one down here because it kind of, further emphasizes that this is a checklist of, things you have done and things you have not done. All right, now the sizing doesn't really match, right? I'm taking a look at some of these icons. That one's not bad. I think the bear's head can be a little bit smaller. So I'll just jump in here, make that a little bit smaller. And the task list, if I take a look at this, right, it doesn't necessarily match perfectly. So I can just make these a little bit larger, thicken out those lines a touch, just so things are looking not bad. And they probably won't be perfect in this stream, but you'll get the idea. I'm going to group all these together, Command and Control G, and this will be tasks. Now maybe, oh yeah, I forgot. We need a title, right? Tasks. Now maybe to let users know that they are on the task lists. Let me just move this in here, right? Task list screen, right? We may want some sort of an indicator. Are you, there you go, Vipin. Are you going to do the active state? So what I'm going to do for that, you just nailed it, Vipin, is I'm going to grab the ellipse tool, draw one out just like this. I'm going to make this nice and fun. So I'm just going to create like a little bit of a blob. Just something like this. And I'm going to put this behind the tasks icon, and maybe I'll just sample one of these colors and just drop the opacity a little bit. And because our background is all vector-based, we can always just dive in here and just move things around if we needed to, right? So we can do that. And we can always play with this color just to get something that kind of stands out. We don't want it to stand out too much. I'm not super happy with the way things are looking right here, but I think for now, we're going to leave it, and then we'll revisit the active state in a little bit. Now, another icon we may want to create is possibly a friends list, right? Or a profile or something like that. Let's go ahead and create a profile. And if you're familiar with the passport in Animal Crossing, it's like a little bit of a passport type of book thing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle just like this. Maybe make it a little bit larger. Make sure everything lines up nicely, right? And I'm going to round out the corners a little bit, at least on all the sides. And then what I might want to do is on the right sides, maybe round it out a touch more to about 5 pixels, something to that extent, right? So this one will be a nice white color. And then to kind of give it that book feel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate Command and Control D, and then the bottom shape, I'm going to move it down a touch, and I'll sample our blue color that we're using. And now we've created a little bit of a book, and you can always dive in here to this particular rectangle and make some very minor changes to the rounded corners. And then I might, just to give it some more style, just rotate it just a touch, right? There we go. Now we've got a little profile. And I might want to thicken it out just a little bit. There we go. Rotate it again. Beautiful. And I'm going to copy this, move this over, call this profile. This is a little bit too large, so I'm going to shrink it down just a touch, move it up. There we go, right? Looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. And this one's obviously going to be on the right-hand side. I'm going to group these. Did I spell that right? No, I did not. Helps if I can spell properly, right? Profile. There we go. Profile. Love the simple shape. Thank you, Cody. So we've got a few icons going on. We're going to move home over. Villagers, we're going to move over. Tasks, we're going to make sure to group all these. We have them grouped. Move these over, and then maybe we'll create one more, which is going to be our friends list. Thanks for joining me, Kate. I'll see you later. Tom Nook would approve. I hope so. Now for our friends list, what we're going to do, we're going to create like a little bit of a chat icon. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, draw one out just like this, round out the corners completely, and then maybe on top we'll have a little bit of a bubble. And you may have seen this icon. I believe I'm kind of pulling inspiration directly from Animal Crossing for this one. Makes it a little bit smaller. I'm going to turn off the borders for these ones. Already, it's looking pretty good. And then on the bottom, we may want a little bit of a arrow pointing down. So for that, we're going to grab our polygon one more time, draw one out. I'm going to flip this around, whoop, whoop. And we can also round out the corners of our polygon as well. So just maybe, about 1 pixel. We don't want to go too crazy. And then we can merge these two together And now we have this cute little chat icon, just like that. Very simple. It's super fast to create things like this in XD. And of course, you can do this in Illustrator, or you can grab an icon. But if you can create it, you might as well do it, right? Bam. I'm going to group all these together and call this friends. Perfect. And there we go. We've got all of our icons nicely created. Now what we want to do is make sure that they're all aligned from each other. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the groups that contain my icons. And then at the top, we're going to press this button right here, which is going to distribute them all horizontally. And there we go. We now have them all perfectly spaced from each other. And if we take a look at our preview, you know what? It looks almost okay. I do want to make sure that there's a little bit of breathing room down here for the text. And now, yeah, looks pretty good. All right. Now, of course, we can spend a lot more time doing these things. Can we have 3 dots inside the chat icon? You know what, Osborne? Just for you, I think we can probably do that. So inside of here, I'm going to use an ellipse. And just to make my life super simple, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this into a repeat grid. Right up here, boop, there we go. And then we can drag out 3 ellipses. Now, obviously, the padding's way too hard, but I'm going to pull these in. And now we have 3 chat icons, or 3 ellipses inside the chat icon. Might be a little bit overdone with this icon up here, but you know what? We're going to leave it. All right, so now I want to focus on the actual content of this section up here. And again, this is going to be our task list, which was suggested by someone in our internal Animal Crossing Slack channel. So there's a few things we might want to do. Right at the top, we may want to indicate what this screen is, in addition to our active state down at the bottom. So what we can do, we can actually grab the tasks icon. I'm going to copy it and just paste it right up here. Now it's a little bit difficult to see. It's actually very difficult to see. We don't need the text. And I'm going to change the color of these lines to, let's say, one of our green. And maybe this one, maybe we'll just use the same color. We'll just choose this green color up here, right? Just like that. So we've got our little icon there. And then over to the right, task list. We'll just choose the same green, make this nice and large. And because this is a header, we can definitely bump the weight up to, let's say, bold. That looks pretty good right about there. And maybe I'll just drop, maybe I'll actually drop this to, what does this color look like? Okay, that's not bad. Just to give a little bit of separation, right? Now maybe over to the right, we may want an add button so we can add new tasks, right? So with the rectangle tool, or sorry, the ellipse tool, that's the one. I'm gonna draw one out, make sure it snaps over to my guide on the right. I'm gonna sample this color. And on the inside, we may want a plus button. Lots of ways to create a plus button, including just using the text tool to create a plus button. But I'm going to draw one out like this. In the border, I'm going to actually sample this background color, so it almost looks like it's kind of punched through. Make this larger, round out the corners, right? There we go. I'm going to duplicate, Command-Control-D, flip this 90 degrees, and we now have a plus button, right? Looks pretty good, and we can make it a little bit smaller if we want to make sure everything lines up nicely, and it looks like it does. But of course, you know, to minty green, I like that. It kind of does look like a minty green. To make it match some of the aesthetic of the rest of the application, I'm going to double click on this rectangle and just kind of pull on these corners, pull on these nodes just a little bit to give it a touch of style. You don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to do something like this, because then if you take a look at the preview, it's just like, what is happening with that plus button? But very subtle changes, just like that. And if you take a look, it kind of works, right? Very subtle. So I'm going to make sure to group these and call this add. Now, down below here, we of course want some of our tasks. So there's a few tools we're going to use to accomplish this, including components, states, and of course, repeat grids. So I'm going to grab my rectangle. And you know what? Let me make sure that this, boop, locks onto the side. So we've got our shape right here, which we're going to use for our actual checkbox. I'm going to round out the corners just a little bit, kind of like that, right? Now maybe there's going to be a border on this corner, so I'm going to use this green right here. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let me check out the preview to make sure it's not too large, and I think that could work. Maybe I'll increase the border just one more, just like that. The corner radius looks pretty good. And then over to the right, we may want a to-do item. So I'll just go ahead and type out to-do item. And I'm going to make sure to left justify this, which is going to help when working with the repeat grid. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And then drop the weight to about medium. So it is, you know, kind of like a text item. Again, check out the preview to make sure things are looking okay. Maybe I'll bump this up 2 more pixels. Beautiful. Just like that. Love the doodly shapes. Not perfect, but cute and matches the theme of the game. I agree, Osborne. I think it does. So I'm going to put this about 16 pixels from the left-hand side. Now, here's a little bit of a tip, especially if you're going to be working with repeat grids. Not every item is going to be the same length. So if I were to create a repeat grid with these 2 items, drag this down, and then this one is, let's say, plant lots and lots of flowers, right? You're noticing it's getting cut off. So what you want to do first is grab this item and actually, instead of a point text, you're going to choose an area text, which is this icon over here to the right in your properties inspector. Turn that on, and then just pull this out to the maximum size that you want your items, which is exactly what this is. Now, before we start turning things into a repeat grid, we may also want to create the on state or the checked state. So I have my checkbox selected. I'm going to turn this into a component. You can do that in a variety of ways, including in your assets panel. You have your component section. You can press the plus button right there, and I'm going to name this checkbox. Now, with that component created, over here to the right in our properties inspector, we can go ahead and create a new state, which is going to be called checked. And now with that created and selected, we can dive in and create our lovely check mark. And again, just like we did before, pen tool, boop, boop, and boop. It's that simple. I'm going to make sure to sample this green so things are consistent, make it a little bit larger and thicker, round out the corners, caps and corners, and all those fun things, and we have a check mark, right? Maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller. Take a look at it. Ooh, that's fancy. Now, if we have time, we're going to get a little bit fancy with the animation of this check mark. Now, to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and this is definitely getting a little bit more advanced, but here's what's going to happen. Inside of here, let me just think this through. You know what I might do? No, I'm going to copy this. I'm actually going to paste this into the default state, just like that. And you're going to notice it pastes it in the default state and the check state. Because I want this to animate, I want to make sure that it's in both of those states. But in the default state, we want to hide the check mark initially. So going in here, I'm going to grab my rectangle, I'm going to draw one out, and I'm going to round out the corners. Now you're asking, what is happening right now? Why are you doing this? And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to use this as a mask to initially hide my check mark. I'll make this a little bit larger so we have a little bit of breathing room, just like that. Round out those corners. And I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to rotate it this way. Make sure this lines up really nicely with my check mark over here. It mostly does, right? And then we're just going to drag this out. Beautiful. Now we want to use both of these as a mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these into a single shape with the Boolean object up top, right? And then we're going to make sure to select the mask layer, which I'm going to name so you all understand what's happening. We have the mask layer selected. We're also going to select the check mark. So we're going to select both of these layers, and then under the object menu, you're going to go mask with shape. Now, right now it looks like nothing happened. It's because the mask is covering the check mark, so it's showing it, right? But in the initial state, we want to make sure that it's not showing. So we're going to dive into that Boolean object, and we are going to move this out. We're actually going to move it this way. So what we can do is we can drag these down just like this. Now, we're going to talk about something for a second. We want to give the impression when the animation is taking place that the bottom part, this part right here, I don't know if the check mark, bits of check marks have names, but this bottom part right here, we want that to come in first, so it goes and then view, right? Something like that. I don't know what the sound effects were, but we're going to run with it. So to kind of get around that, we're going to make sure that this part of the mask is basically right on the edge of the check mark. And then this part of the mask is actually a little bit further down. So that when the animation takes place, this part of the mask or this part of the check mark is revealed first, and then that part, the longer stem, is revealed second. A lot of that may not make sense, but once the animation takes place, you'll hopefully see it in action. All right, so we have that done. Now if we hop into our checked state, you're going to notice nothing is there. Because we were editing the default component, the default state of the master component, it applied those changes across everything. So now what we can do is we can hop in here, we can grab the bits of our check mark, just like this, right? And we can start moving things into place. Move that up and move this up, just like that. There we go. And now the check mark is revealed. Perfect. Now, how do we actually wire this up and actually make something happen from it? Here's what we're going to do. With our default state selected, we're going to hop into prototype mode, just like this. We are going to select our check mark. You can select the entire component if you want. We're going to press the blue handle over here to the left, just like that. Just going to spread out this little wire to the side, and this will allow us to create transitions between two different components. So over here to the right, we want tap as the trigger because we want a user to open this application, go to the screen, and tap on that check mark to do something. That something and that destination is going to be the checked destination that we created and modified. So we're going to choose that. It's going to automatically default to auto animate, which is exactly what we want. And then for the easing options, there are a few that might work. Ease in and out is a pretty good one. Snap could potentially work, but because it's so small, I think ease in and out is going to be pretty nice. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bump the duration up to 3 seconds initially. And you're probably you're thinking that's a long time, and it is. And the reason I'm doing that is just to kind of show you what's happening as the animation is taking place. We're going to drop that down in just a moment. So with that done, I'm going to press the play button at the top. And Cornell's asking, is it possible to set and start animation one after another? So not at the moment. Definitely more advanced animation features are at the top of our minds. Maybe not right now because collaboration because of COVID is at the top of our minds, but something the team is definitely exploring. Now, let's do this. It's going to be a little bit blurry because I'm zooming in, but when I tap on this, look at that. Again, I'm slowing it down purposely so you can see what's happening. Let me play this one more time. Again, slow down so we can see what's happening. You know, the bottom part comes in and then the top part. And of course you can move those masks a little bit further out if you want to change the way this looks. However, if we were to bump this down to, let's say, 0.6 seconds and play it, that looks much better, right? And of course you can go to the second state, the check state, and go back to the first so that you can check it on and you can check it off. Fancy, right? Now, the cool thing about this is that because it was all built into the master component, we can apply this to all the check marks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these objects. We have our check mark or checkbox selected. We also have our to-do item. Let me just move these down a touch. And I'm going to add both of these into a repeat grid. So right here at the top, we're going to press repeat grid, just like that. And we're going to drag a few additional ones down the artboard. And we can adjust the padding if we wanted to, just like that. And then we can dive in here and make some changes. So let's say move my house. We might want to do that. And if you're not familiar with Animal Crossing, this may go completely over your head, but it's a good game. It's fun. Plant new flowers. Bother Tom, because of course, right? What else do we do? Give fossils to Blathers. Give me suggestions. I need some suggestions in here on what you would probably want on a to-do list. Find Gulliver. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen Gulliver in a while. I'm very worried for him. And then finally, we might want achieve 5-star rating. I'm probably never going to get a 5-star rating for my island, but you know what? We're going to run with that. So we've got our to-do list all set up. I'm going to go ahead and press the play button at the top. And again, because we built those checkboxes as components and we edited the master state, we can check that on, we can check that on, we can check that on, maybe turn that off. So in no particular order, you can definitely go through this list. And here's some pick up message in the bottle, talk to villagers, recharge switch. Oh, that's a good idea. I don't know if I'm charging my switch. Why, Tom? Yeah, I don't know. All right, so there we go. We've got our task list looking good. But how long do we have left? We have about 10 minutes left. I wonder if we can do this in 10 minutes. How do we add, what does the experience look like to write mom back? Yeah, I agree. I get messages from my fake mom in the game all the time, and I'm very confused. What did the UI look like when you want to add? When you press this button, what happens, right? Well, let's go ahead and find out. So let's design something out. I'm going to grab my rectangle, and I'm going to draw one out a little bit larger, just like this. Let me actually grab that add button, move it right to the top. I'm going to round out these corners. We're going to do this fairly quickly because we're running out of time. There we go. Hey, Destiny, welcome. We've got our add button, and we might want to type out add new task. And again, this is going to be the UI that you are going to go into when you want to add a new task. Make sure to line this up. Now, there's two things I might want on this particular dialog, a text field and also a button. And we're going to make these fairly different so that people know that one is a text field and one is a button. I'm going to grab my rectangle. I'm going to draw one out just like this. This is going to be the text field, so I'm not going to completely round out the corners, but I'm going to round them out a little bit. And I'm going to set the border to our lovely green. Maybe I'll make it a little bit thicker, just like that. And on the inside, we may want maybe an example, right? Plant flowers, just like that. I'm going to drop the weight to about medium. I'm going to drop the size a little bit as well, using that little handle at the bottom. And maybe I'll even drop the opacity, just so people know that this is a placeholder, right? Move these up a touch. And then down below, I can use the same shape to start creating our button. And this one's going to be completely rounded. And I'm going to use the fill as the green. I'm going to set the fill to the green. And then I can always just, copy some text. Set this to white, or maybe I can even set it to this greenish color that we're using. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bold, and I'll make sure to center it. And the difference of the button and the text field is really going to help with the user experience. It looks a little bit strange, especially if we preview this, right? It looks a little bit strange, but it's going to help, I think, I hope. I'm going to make sure to group these. I'm going to add button. And, things are looking a little bit strange right now, but everything's going to make sense in just a moment. I'm going to name this field, and ideally I would probably also convert these into components, but I want to make sure to get through this before we wrap things up. There we go. Now I'm actually going to set the fill to our greenish brown color that we're using and turn off the border. Now you're probably asking, I can't see anything, what's happening? There's two things we're going to do to rectify this situation. One, we're going to add a shadow. Because of course, right? We're going to make this a little bit larger, bump it down, bump up the blur, and drop the opacity a touch. Again, very subtle shadows. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to separate this from the background. And I want to make sure that all of this snaps nicely to the guides. There we go. We're going to separate this box from the background, and we're going to do that using a big old rectangle. So I'm going to grab my rectangle from the tools panel, whoop, drag one out. I can use the green that we've been using, just like this. I'm going to make sure it's below all of this information, right? Just like that. Shadow, knew it. Yep, you got it. And then we're going to drop the opacity a little bit. Now let me actually hide this for a second. I want to make sure to group all this information, right? Just so I have everything. This is going to be add window. There we go. Let's turn this on, and there we go. So we have a little bit of separation now from the background and our dialogue. And things are looking okay. I would probably tweak the shadow just a little bit, maybe bump that down a touch, maybe add a little bit of green in here, just a little bit, right? Very subtle. It looks okay. Doesn't look great, I think I might make a few tweaks, but I think for now we might work with it. All right. Now, of course, we don't want this to kind of be there all the time. So we're going to be using components to make this happen. Here's what we're going to do. This is going to be called the overlay. We have 5 minutes left to do this. Okay, we're going to select all these elements. We're going to turn this into a single component. Press this plus button over here. Now, for the default state, we don't want the background to show. We don't want the overlay to show, so we're going to drop the opacity to 0. We also don't want this window to be there. So we're actually going to drag it all the way down below the artboard so we can have it kind of float up as this is all taking place. But we do want the add button over here to the right, so I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to make sure actually to name this add, just because it's driving me crazy. Now, our default state's complete. We now need to create the additional state, what it's going to look like when the add button is pressed. So one more time, I'm going to press the plus button. We're going to create a new state. This will be called add, and now we can dive in here and make the changes. So overlay is going to go back to about 70%. We're going to grab this, move it up so it nicely lines up with everything else. And then just to get a little bit fancy, we can grab these lines that are part of the add button and we can rotate them. So it turns into an X. Fancy, isn't it? Very clever. So here we go. So we have our default state, we have our add state, and now we need to wire it up. Just like we did with the check mark. We're going to go into the prototype mode and we're going to select the add component. We're going to press the handle to the right. It's going to sprout out that interaction. And then over here, we're going to choose the add destination. Now, in terms of the easing options, ease in and out is probably what we're going to end up going with, but we're going to choose snap for this one just to kind of see what it looks like, and we'll try 0.6 seconds. Let's go ahead and press play. And we're going to go ahead and press the add button. View. There was some weirdness going. Oh, you know what happened? It's because in the initial, let me go back in the initial add button, I actually rotated that one button, right? Or the one line that's part of the add. So I'm going to dive in here to my add state, and maybe I'll just rotate it the other way. Maybe that'll help. Just like that. Let's see what that looks like. That looks a bit better, right? And it has a little bit of a snap at the end of it. So now I can go into prototype mode again, go to the add state, choose the close button, and go back to our default state, right? So now I can close it, open it, and we have a nice little interaction going on. Let me zoom in so we can see what's happening, right? And look at that little add button, just kind of doing its thing. We can also, if you really want to get fancy, because who doesn't want to get fancy, we can also slightly alter the actual add button, bubble, whatever you want to call this, right? Again, very subtle. We just want to, make it very, very subtle, just like that, right? And then let's do this one more time. And you can kind of see that add button is kind of moving a little bit, which is fun. I'm having a blast with this. And of course, you can continue this and have interactions for the text field, the add button, and of course, we have our lovely check marks that we created. So just a recap very quickly. We started off this stream by creating this background completely from scratch using the confetti plugin. And again, I will be uploading an individual tutorial on how that's done to my YouTube channel, also post on Twitter and a few other places. So follow me on all the things. And then we created these lovely little icons at the bottom, which I'm going to tweak a little bit, but I think they're looking pretty good, honestly. And then we went to create this task list. And we used component states to create this animated check mark. Look at that. Isn't that fun? I'm just having a blast doing this. I can just do this all day. It's little cute micro interactions. We used repeat grids, and then finally we rounded things up by creating what the experience looks like when you add something to your list. This thing comes in from the bottom. I could probably speed that up a little bit so it's not too slow, but that is just about going to do it. This was fun. I'm probably going to continue this throughout another masterclass. I have a lot of ideas, and many of my coworkers also suggested a few things. So we're going to just continue this, and we'll put a whole project together. We'll put a case study on Behance. It'll be fun, and all of you are going to be part of it. So if you have suggestions for this Animal Crossing companion app, definitely tweet it at me. I can't wait to see all of your suggestions. That is just about going to do it for today's masterclass. Stick around in just a few minutes. Nick and Andrew are coming up, and then Andrea right after that with the Daily Creative Challenge. So Thank you everyone for joining me today on your Friday. Hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you all next week.